Hi there, if you've watched any of my previous videos on personality, you'll know that it can be broken down in one of several ways, including the colour model and the big five. In this video, I'm going to be answering the question, can personality be changed over time? Plot spoiler, the short answer is yes, so if that's all you care about, I will see you in the next one. Just joking, but in order to be able to answer the question, there are a few things I need to be able to cover first. One of the most fundamental things to know about personality is that it's partly influenced by genetics. That's not to say that genetics solely dictates what personality you have, but it does dictate where you start off in terms of your personality at birth. The rest of your personality is shaped by your environment and your experiences, which in turn then determines your values and your beliefs. These values and beliefs affect how you see the world and how you react both positively and negatively to your events. So in this video, rather than trying to view personality as one big thing, we're going to break it down into one of several traits, where each of these traits then can be changed, which will affect your personality as a whole. So as I mentioned already, personality traits have a genetic set point, which I guess you can think of as some kind of predisposition. So for example, if you take a trait like extraversion and your genetics have set you up to be low on extraversion, or in other words, introverted, then under neutral circumstances, you're going to grow and develop into becoming an introvert. Whereas if you grew up in some kind of positive environment, whether that's one that is nurturing or encouraging or helps you develop your social skills or gets you enthusiastic about hanging around with like-minded people, then this could push you more towards being extroverted. So the way to think of this is I like to use the analogy of an elastic band or a rubber band. Let's say you take a particular personality trait and you've been genetically set up to be in the, say, 20th percentile. It won't take too much effort or energy to move you to, say, the 25th percentile, but the further you want to move away from your genetic set point, the more energy or effort it takes. That's why I like to think of this as an elastic or rubber band, because it doesn't take too much effort or energy to move you a little bit away from where it was, but the more you pull, the more effort it takes to pull you further. And of course, if you take this analogy to the extreme, you could argue that if you pull yourself sufficiently far ahead, then at some point the elastic band might snap. And I guess the way I would explain this is that this is the point at which you're no longer true to yourself and you're a little bit lost with who you are. So now for the rest of the video, we're going to go through the big five personality traits and what kind of actions you can do to either increase or decrease your percentile rating on that particular trait. So the first trait which I'm going to mention is extraversion, and this is something that I've already alluded to, but most people don't realize how deep or complex extraversion actually is. Extraversion goes beyond just social tendencies. It's not just that extroverts like to be around people and introverts don't like to be around people. It's also related to how you value either the present or the future. So extroverts tend to put more emphasis on the present because it makes them feel good, and that feeling is what reinforces the behavior. Whereas introverts don't feel as good in the moment, which is why they end up putting more emphasis on the future. So some of the things that will make you increase your extraversion is to find an environment or create an environment that will make you feel excited and present and comfortable in it. There are a few perspective shifts as well that can help, so to put more emphasis on the importance of acting now rather than delaying that gratification for later. This can be helped by forming beliefs that friendship or connections are very important to help you either accelerate through life or making you feel like you're wanted or you belong. What I find about most personality changes is they are not really done through intellectual consideration, but rather something that latches onto your emotional impulses. So in other words, if there's positive reinforcement, it's going to make you feel good, and that's more likely to make you want to do it again. And equally, if you want to break a habit or break a particular trait or pattern of behavior, then negative reinforcement might put you off as well. It's not to say that spiritual or intellectual ideas, quotes, books, and so on can't help you move your perspective from one place to the next, but these things tend to happen over a longer period of time because they need to both resonate with you and be given enough time to soak up. Emotions, though, are much more fast acting, so if you can find ways that will tap into your emotional impulses and desires, you're much more likely to make a change. Because high extraversion is correlated with high impulsivity, then one of the ways that you can decrease your extraversion if you feel that you're experiencing too much impulsivity or you've got tendencies for gambling or taking unnecessary risks, then again, the same thing you can do is through positive or negative reinforcement, prove to yourself that it's important to take time to consider your options and opinions, and then those will help you move in a slower and more considered pace. The next trait is agreeableness, and this correlates with your compassion, your empathy, your warmth, and how much you tend to put other people's needs above your own. People with low agreeableness are often thought of as being unempathetic or a little bit cold, heartless, or callous in the extreme. People with high agreeableness are often thought of as kind, warm-hearted, nice to be around, and friendly. But the flip side is they often don't say how they feel, and they often negotiate on behalf of the other person rather than themselves. This can then lead to a build-up of frustration because they're not actually saying how they feel, and they're making decisions that they don't actually want to do. Disagreeable people don't have this problem because they are much more blunt, they know what they want, they know how to get it, and they have no problem offending people in order to be able to get there. So to increase your agreeableness, you need to develop that sense of empathy, compassion, and this can be done by seeing the consequences of your actions. Rather than shutting yourself off from how other people feel, take time to see how people in worse situations from you experience life and their circumstances, and this can help you develop a sense of empathy. Another thing that disagreeable people can do is just learn the social utility of coming across as more empathetic or compassionate, because there's very little to be gained by being blunt or mean to someone when you're actually needing their help. If you're trying to lower your agreeableness, on the other hand, or at least mitigate the issues that come with being highly agreeable, then one of the best things you can do is to develop your negotiating skills. Understanding that if you don't ask, you rarely get, so risking offending someone, even though it's very unlikely that it will actually lead to offense, is often the right way to go. People who are very high in agreeableness often think that if I say the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person, then that relationship will be sabotaged. But what these people often don't realize is that people will respect you more when you stand up for what you believe in. The next trait is neuroticism, and this is how you experience negative emotion, both in terms of your anticipation of the future and your experience of negative emotion when something bad happens to you. It's important to understand that if you want to become more calm in general or react less extremely to negative situations, this isn't something that can be fixed overnight. It takes some conscious effort, some determination, but ultimately a willingness to adapt and understand your environment better. Obviously, this is easier said than done, but hypothetically, if you knew the consequences of all your actions and the actions of others, there'd be less reason to get upset about them. The more knowledge, understanding, and wisdom you have about how the world actually works, the easier it is to stay calm in stressful situations. So following on from this, I think it's useful to immerse yourself in unique or interesting ideas, different people with different perspectives, and books and knowledge and so on that can help you build that understanding and build that data set that can help you realize what actually happens rather than overthinking and anticipating the worst. Usually you don't want to increase your neuroticism per se, but it could be useful for people with very low neuroticism to understand that neuroticism does serve some purposes. The higher neuroticism you have, the more likely you're going to anticipate the worst possible scenario and react most extremely despite what actual scenario occurs. This does serve an important purpose in the wider social context because it allows others to become aware of the consequence of making the wrong decision and to anticipate and be more precautious about certain actions. The neurotic person in the household or the village effectively serves the purpose of a smoke detector. They let you know when something is going wrong or when something could go wrong, and this could be useful from a survival perspective. The next trait is conscientiousness, and this revolves around your sense of duty, your work ethic, your sense of purpose, how likely you are to get started with certain tasks, how likely you are to see them through to the end, and how orderly you are in general. So the thing about conscientiousness is that if you're high in it, you tend to be very driven and you end up being more likely to be successful because you're able to see through important tasks. But the flip side is that you also find it harder to switch off from that work, whereas someone with low conscientiousness tends to find it a lot more easy to relax, but they're also much more likely to procrastinate and fail to get started on necessary duties. If you're low in conscientiousness and your goal is to increase that, then one of the best things you can do is really come to terms with your sense of values, your purpose, what things you actually care about, and make a list of goals or desired outcomes over the short term and the long term. Doing this reinforces the strong reason why this is important to you, and this can help you put into perspective the kinds of things that you actually care about, and then it can help move you towards those goals. At the end of the day, if you're low in conscientiousness, then you're not really going to do anything you don't want to do. So it's very important to come to terms with what you actually do want to do and this will help you and guide you along the correct path. So try and figure out what kind of person are you, what kind of values do you have, and then start forming plans around those things. If you're someone with high conscientiousness, but you have a balanced life and a balanced perspective, then it's not really a problem and it's going to be more advantageous than not. But if you're the kind of person who lets work consume you and you don't have a chance to take a step back and you're neglecting some of the other important aspects in your life, such as family, friendship, or even your health, then it's important really to come to terms with what areas you need to improve on. And this can help shift your focus away from one dimension, which could be work, and you can dedicate and use that same energy to stimulate and affect other areas of your life. The last of these traits is openness, and this is another interesting one because it's a little bit polarizing in that people with high openness tend to see the world very differently from people with low openness. If you're someone with high openness, you tend to see the world filled with ideas, potential, possibilities, and even patterns. But if you have low openness, you tend to prefer things as they are, you tend to be a bit more traditional, conventional, and you see the purpose and utility to having a sense of order and structure in the world. If your goal is to try and increase your openness, then the best way you can do it is by reading or immersing yourself in different types of art and media, such as poetry, paintings, and so on. But certainly reading from the kind of intellectual side of openness is one of the best ways to do it, because as you read more and understand more about how the world works, you start to form new patterns, more ideas, and new opinions, and this will boost your openness over the longer term. Openness is another trait where you might not want to reduce or lower your openness, but it might be useful to understand the social utility in having certain conventions, certain structures in place, because not all new things are good and not all old things are bad. So I guess when you look at personality as a whole, on the one side, I think it's important to come to terms with who you are and not change yourself or try to change yourself purely because you don't like yourself or you think that you need to change for the sake of changing. But if there's a particular trait that you think is holding you back and it really is the thing that you've identified, then taking some of these actionable steps to increase or decrease that particular trait over a longer period of time can be of benefit. So I think it's important to remember that when you're trying to change particular personality traits, they don't tend to change overnight, and it does take some conscious effort and attention and a sufficient amount of time to make these things happen. The more you're trying to change these things, the more you're effectively swimming against the current, but it's not to say that that effort isn't worthwhile. With any kind of long-term change, these things won't be noticeable in the short term. It's only after a period of months or years that you'll look back and think, maybe you've become more conscientious and more hardworking or more organized or less neurotic, but you won't notice this in the short term. Like going to the gym, you won't notice any changes in between sessions. It's only when you look back on several months or even more where you'll notice that this thing was worthwhile. So I'm going to leave it there with this one. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts, if you got any benefits, if you have any additional ideas or feedback or suggestions. Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.